Hey Dan,
Hey Anthony, how are you?
good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Greetings from sunny Los Angeles.
Yeah, I was about to say. So, correct me if I'm wrong. It's your birthday this week.
It is my 40th birthday on Sunday.
Wow. And how's that going to be? How are you going to be celebrating that?
It's to be very honest with you, it's going to be a mellow celebration. I had big plans. I was going to go with about 20 of my friends to Oaxaca in Mexico
Oh,
for my birthday because two of my favorite things in the world are mezcal and mole, the chocolate sauce.
yeah,
I'll do that when I turn 41. I'm lucky enough. I'm grateful to have a really nice, big, comfortable backyard.
yeah,
So maybe, the coronavirus is pretty bad in Los Angeles right now. So unfortunately, I can't have a lot of people over, but I might have two or three friends over, play some music, and put something on the grill, drink a few beers.
yeah. I mean, I think right now, given the circumstances, that's a good celebration.
That's as good as you can hope for. The honest truth is, I'm really grateful. I'm going to be spending. I'm healthy. I'm going to get to be with a few friends, and the weather will be nice. So it could be a lot worse. I'll have the big crazy party with the DJ. That'll be next year.
Yeah, 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 for sure. I mean, it's the same everywhere. I mean, even here, we're in the middle of a ridiculous crisis, economic crisis that might turn into a famine. Apparently, it's going in a really bad direction. So let's see how things go. But let's stick positive and wish you a happy 40th birthday. All
Thank you. I
all
really
the,
appreciate it.
all the way from Beirut. Um,
I appreciate it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So to just go into this, so I've been doing these talks with few people that I consider, people who are doing a great job at what they do, and obviously you're one of the people that I met a few years ago back in Estonia, and we'll get to that story at that point. But I wanted you to go first, and just to tell whoever is watching and listening a little bit about your story and how you got into music, and like your story from even when you were a kid towards eventually going into music.
So I've been doing music in one way or another since I was 15 years old. Um, what I do now, to begin at the end, is I run a company called Friendly Fire Licensing that gets music. I represent the catalogues of about 50 different record labels and publishers from around the world, mostly outside the United States, and I work to get them into TV shows, movies, commercials, and video games. And I'm sure we can talk more about that later, but in terms of how I got into it, I grew up in a musical family. My mother is a cabaret singer. She writes musicals. I played classical piano from the time I was about 5 years old. But I became a punk rocker, and I started my first label when I was 15 years old.
Really?
Uh,
How,
I had
how
no idea what I was doing.
like what how does one start a label at 15?
I you just do. I wanted to put out. I thought it was cool. I found some local punk bands. It's probably not what I would listen to now, but it was a while ago.
Where were
And
you where were you based at that time?
I'm from San Francisco, so I was growing up in San Francisco, and I would save up money by doing, mowing my neighbors' lawns and babysitting, and finally I had a couple $100, and I put out some 7 inches. I was too young to drive, so my father would drive me around to the different record stores in San Francisco, and I would go in with these little 7 inches I put out and just beg them. I didn't know what distribution was.
That was probably
I would just
that was the version of distribution at the time, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this was in, well, I've already revealed my age, so this would have been in about 1995, pre Deezer, pre internet streaming.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I would go in, I would beg them. Finally, they would agree to take one on consignment. They'd say, okay, come back in 3 months, and if we sold it, we'll give you $1. Literally, if we sell it, we'll give you $1, and I would be so excited. But from there, I got involved with a lot of other stuff. I played drums in a bunch of bands. I was the editor of a music magazine called Law of Inertia that I did for years. I went to college. I got very involved with radio. I ran my college radio station. I graduated, I got into radio promotion, and then when I was about 22 or 23, I started a record label, a real record label this time.
Okay. What was this one called?
So this one was called Friendly Fire Recordings.
Which is we're gonna get to that, because there's a difference between Friendly Fire Recordings and Friendly Fire Licensing.
I know, yeah. They're two different companies, but because I'm bad at graphic design, it was just very easy for me to take recordings out of the name and put in licensing. But Friendly Fire Recordings, I put out, about 20 different artists. We were nominated for a Grammy at one point, and that's what I did for, about 10 years. That was my focus.
Yeah, I was going to say, so if we go back to, so when you graduated, so right after that, you started working at a thing called Fanatic Promotion, yeah. So how did that go about? What was that about? And if there's one thing that when I've looked through your history, one thing that's prominent, except for maybe at one point, is that you really go for the long haul. So you give things time, like you give a lot of time to working with a project or within a company or so on and so forth. So let's go from there. Fanatic Promotion, what was that? And because if I read your bio and it says that at some point you were the office manager and then you ended up becoming the vice president. So that's sort of something that doesn't necessarily happen every day. And I want to know the story behind that.
Well, I mean, I was right out of college, and so the company was a music marketing, radio promotion and publicity company based in New York. And yeah, I started, I just needed a job. I was 21 years old. I just moved to New York City. I had no money. And I went in. I had already been running my college radio station, so they had been pitching music to me. So when I graduated, I wanted to work there. It's funny because when I like this story. The person who sort of hired me, a guy named Daniel Gill, who remains a friend of mine, runs a company called Forcefield, which is a PR company. I was emailing with him 30 minutes ago. I guess they interviewed a bunch of people, and it came down to two top people for this office manager job. It was me and this other guy. And what they tell me, the reason that they ended up hiring me is because the other guy got really dressed up for his interview.
Really? As opposed
to... like nice shiny shoes and a button-down shirt. And I came in with jeans and a t-shirt and my beat-up old sneakers. And apparently they said to themselves, wow, this guy is so confident that he's good that he didn't bother getting dressed up.
All right.
Hey, that's half the reason I'm in the music industry is so I don't have to wear a suit and tie.
Yeah, I think we're all in that for that. So you stayed there for 3 years or something like that?
About 3 years, yeah.
Okay, and in that time, how was the progression? Like, how did you go from office manager to vice president? It's again not something that's very common. So how was the progression on that level? Like, how was it office manager directly to vice president? Surely there were steps along the way.
There were a few steps, and in fairness, it was not a huge company. I think at its peak it was about 20 people, 18, 20 people. I started out. I was just trying to absorb as much information as I could. I was working very long hours, but a lot data entry, put packaging. I mean, the amount of time that I spent putting CDs in manila folders and putting postage on them. But I went from that to working with this guy, Daniel, who I told you about, doing radio promotion. And then I enjoyed that, but I realized that part of what I really enjoyed about the job was sort of the A&R part of it. And people normally talk about A&R in the context of a label. But to me, A&R is really anywhere in the music industry. If you're finding talent, labels, artists who are really inspiring, who you want to work with. So I started going out and finding some people myself. By the end, I managed to, I think I was doing a good job, and I was asked to move up. But, then I left Fanatic, and must have been around 2004. And really, since that time, I've been my own boss.
Okay.
I'm in some ways, I sort of consider myself to be a diehard independent.
Yeah.
Of course, with what I do now, inevitably you have dealings with the major labels and the major publishers and all the different people in the music ecosystem. But I'm a big believer in the power of independence.
Yeah, same here.
And as you mentioned before, I mean, I do try and be in things for the long haul. I mean, I always tell people it's, I'm not sure if I have any other skills besides music stuff. I plan on doing this for a long time. My goal was never to get in, be sleazy, make a bunch of money, and then go start a venture capital firm. That's not the way I do it. And my philosophy back then and now is that the best working relationships are the ones that last over the course of years. It's really great to work with someone on a project. It's even better to have them come back and say, hey, the last project we did went really well. Let's do a new project, I think.
Okay. So just to go over, so when you left Fanatic Promotion, going after that, you ended up working with Terrorbit.
Terrible.
Yeah. So yeah. What was that like? What was that role? And because I went through just your profile and your LinkedIn and all that, so I kind of like just memorized quickly. But I just want to know, like, what was the next step after Fanatic Promotion, and what eventually led to Friendly Fire? Like, what was the reasoning behind Friendly Fire while this was happening? So you were obviously working a job where you were probably getting a stable salary, and then on the other side you were doing your own thing.
Yeah, for the music industry, yeah, sure. I had actually I came up with the idea to run a label while I was still at Fanatic. I just thought it'd be a fun hobby. In the very, 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 very early days of the label, I was even maybe going to run it with one of my coworkers at Fanatic. That ended up not working out. I just decided to do it on my own. When I left Fanatic, by that point, my main focus was the record label. And on the side, that A&R work that I had been doing for Fanatic, which had really become kind of my favorite thing to do, I was doing on the side with Terrorbird, which is another music marketing company that was founded by other ex-Fanatic employees. So sort of I was splitting my time. The honest truth is my passion was the record label, but it was early for the label. I wasn't able to make a living from the label in the early days.
Of course, yeah.
So on the side, I was bringing some projects in for Terrorbird. But I got fairly lucky with the label because relatively early on, actually the first band that I signed was a band that I still love, called Asobi Seksu. They were from New York. Their singer though was from Tokyo. So the name is Japanese. I think the euphemistic translation would be playful sex.
Okay.
The literal translation is, are we allowed to swear?
Yeah. Who cares, man?
The literal translation is sport fuck would be the literal translation. But this band was great and actually kind of had a minor hit with this record that I put out when I was maybe 24, and it sold, 40 or 50,000 copies. As one of my first projects. So that, put me in a position where I was very lucky to be able to, within a couple of years, kind of focus purely on the label, which was my baby. When it's your own company, you just work a little harder.
Yeah, always. And so after this, you were also working in parallel with cooking vinyl, which
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. Like you were the VP of Cooking Vinyl, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yes.
Of
Well,
Vinyl America.
yeah, Cooking Vinyl America. So yeah, I don't want to. Cooking Vinyl in the UK is a fantastic label. It's been around
Yeah, I know.
for
I
decades.
know the team. Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, Martin's a delightful guy.
Yeah.
I was working. So there was a guy named Eric Gilbert, wonderful fellow, originally from the UK, but was living in the States, who had essentially started a US publishing arm. So again, it was, it was a side project, but Eric is such a fantastic person, great taste, and really good to work with. So he brought me on to get some help grow the roster. And I worked with him for a while. We brought on some bands that I really love. That since then, since I've left, Cooking Vinyl America has actually changed their name. It's called Duchamp Publishing.
Okay.
And Eric was one of the last people I saw before I went into isolation for for coronavirus, because I threw a concert in my backyard and he was a surprise guest back in March.
Cool. And so shifting away from the Cooking Vinyl, now I want to go into deep into Friendly Fire licensing versus Friendly Fire recordings. First of all, why the difference? Why because it's clear that there's a difference, obviously.
Yeah.
Just want to know what's the difference between the two for those who don't know, and
Sure.
and just so you can tell me the story behind why you started, and also why the name Friendly Fire, which is kind of a very popular name of a band as well. So
Yes, it is. I knew you were going to ask that.
go ahead and go from the start and take it there.
Sure. The name, okay, so if you know what friendly fire actually means, it's a term in warfare when you accidentally shoot someone on your own side.
Oh, I had no idea about that.
Yeah, so that's when you're in battle and you're shooting at the enemy, but instead you shoot your own guy. So in a way, it's actually kind of a dark name.
Okay.
I came up with it it was around 2003. Things, the U.S. had just invaded Iraq, which I did not approve of, but there was, war was in the news, and I loved the concept of this this concept. It's violent and it's friendly fire. I don't know. I liked it. I don't want to cause any controversy. They're wonderful people. We came way before the band Friendly Fires.
Okay.
I'm just
say
I put out my first record in 2003. I think the first Friendly Fires album was in 2006 or 2007. No big deal. It's fine. I like them. They know about us. We know about them. There's a booking agency in the Netherlands called Friendly Fire.
Okay.
Same deal. We came before them too, but I'm not bragging. These are
just saying.
I'm just saying.
Okay, so what's the difference for you between both of them, as recording and as licensing, as your role specifically between both of them?
So Friendly Fire Recordings, which was the first one that I started, it's a record label. So I did all of the things that an independent record label would do. I'd find artists, work on them to, get their albums together, build out a release plan, create the artwork, do manufacturing for CDs and vinyl, work with a distributor to get it up on all of the streaming platforms, help to book their tours, do PR, do radio. Of course, when you're a small label, you end up sort of being let's call it the de facto manager of a lot of the, not officially, but when it's a small band.
Yeah, you do all the work at the end of the day.
You do all the stuff. Yeah, when someone calls you up at night crying.
You're the psychologist as much as you are the manager.
Yeah, I would say I'm half babysitter and half fireman.
Yeah, but
I was lucky to work with some really amazing bands. And what happened, especially towards the end of the end of the label, sort of towards the end of when I was focusing, I had a couple artists on the label. I didn't know much about licensing. Licensing, synchronization, getting songs into TV and commercials was like, it was a bonus. Every once in a while, someone would come to me and say, hey, we want to use your song in a TV show and we have $5,000. And I would just kind of say, oh, cool. Okay, great. I talked to the band, neat. But it was like it's kind of just like finding some money on the ground as you were walking along. I wasn't really earning it in a way. I wasn't working for it. But I had a couple artists on the label. I had one band called the Phenomenal Handclap Band. We're this very fun 70s style kind of disco funk band. And they had a song called 15 to 20. And another band on the label called Faunts, Faunts, who I still love, who had a song that was in the end credits of a very big video game called Mass Effect. So anyone who's like a video gamer will remember this game.
Okay. And
I started realizing that I started looking at, this was as physical sales, we're talking, maybe 2010, as physical sales were starting to decline. And the streaming platforms, the Deezers and the Spotifys and so on were on the way up, but it wasn't making up for the loss. At that point, it wasn't making up for the lost revenue on physical. And I was looking at how money was coming in. I was realizing it's from licensing. It's from these licensing requests that I'm getting for these songs. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying just a few minutes ago about the thing I really aim for is to get to work on multiple projects with people. So what started happening is that music supervisors who had come to me out of the blue to license, let's say, a Phenomenal Handclap Band song or an Asobi Seksu track, would then come back to me a month later and say, hey, Dan, we had a really good experience working with you last time. We have this new project. We're doing a commercial and we're looking for something that sounds like this or sounds like this. Do you have that in the catalog for your label? And, the honest truth is, in my own label, I didn't necessarily. I had 20 bands. They were all kind of in the indie rock world. But because I have this history in A&R, I had a lot of friends.
Okay.
So putting two and two together and saying, I don't have what you're looking for, but I know someone who does.
Okay.
I have a friend in a band. I have a friend who runs a label. What if I connect you with them? And I realized that I really enjoyed that. And so maybe 6 years ago, give or take, I decided to sort of switch the focus from the label, which still technically I run, but I haven't put anything new out in a while, to licensing, where really my job is purely, now I'm not organizing the release. I'm not doing the PR campaign. I'm not booking the tours. Not that anyone's touring right now. Yeah. My focus in a way is more narrow, but I work with a much broader variety of artists. And my job is really solely focused on getting music into TV, film, commercials, video games.
And has that, well, given that you did obviously the whole label part / management, and now you've done the licensing part, which is, as you're saying, putting the music onto TVs, games, whatever. Have you felt that you switched because financially it made better sense, or because on the sense in your career and in your mind it was more satisfying for you to go into licensing, or and also financially, is it a better deal for you? I don't know. I don't know much about the licensing world, but I would like to know, is it an area of work that makes more sense than management financially, and, as I said, in a satisfactory way for you personally?
I think the answer to all of your questions is yes. I'd been running a label for 10 years. I loved it, but I was growing a little. You do something for 10 years, you're ready for a new adventure. I wanted to stay in music. I wanted to keep working with artists I believed in, but I was ready for a new adventure. Financially, it's better. I mean, it's great to be in a position. I don't get to do this every day. And of course, you have frustrating days and bad news and crises, just like, but it's a great feeling to be able to call up a label or a band that I've been working with that I believe in and say, hey, guess what? Someone wants to use your song in a commercial and they have $80,000. What do you think? Or they want to use your song in a TV show and they have $10,000. It's a great feeling. The way I work, I mean, I can be very open about this because I don't think there's any secret to it. I'm not acting as a publisher, so I don't own the rights. We're essentially a third party. You would call it a sync agent. We're not a music supervisor exactly. We're not being paid by the ad agency or the TV company to find the song for them. Our job is to really advocate on behalf of the artists and the labels that we represent. And so we work on a commission basis. I pitch music for free. So if you're in a band and I'm pitching your music and I don't get anything, you don't pay me. I don't get paid. If I get something, we work on it. We take a commission. So it's sort of like we only get paid when the artist gets paid, which is a way of working that's hopefully fair for everybody.
Yeah. I imagine it's the same as when you're getting a gig. I mean, you're pitching for that. If you're a booking agent, you're doing the same. You're pitching, if you're a booking agent for an emerging artist and you want to pitch them to different venues, different festivals, or different promoters, you have to do that. And sometimes you're going to get it, sometimes you're not.
Exactly.
But with what's happened now in the past few months with COVID-19 and what's again arguably looking like a global recession, on top of this, given that I don't think there's ever been more content being created online than now, has this been an upward spiral for licensing? Meaning, do you feel that now different platforms online who create video content are suddenly like, we need this song for this video and so on? Have you felt that we're going in a trajectory that's upward at this point in time?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, licensing is in some ways more recession-proof than other parts of the music industry. Again, for my friends who are booking agents, I mean, it hurts my heart. I have so many friends who are involved in live shows, and I love live shows, and touring is just, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Licensing, I mean, if you think, all sync licensing is when you attach music to a moving picture. And the amount of content that was coming out before, during, and after COVID-19 is, I mean, if you had all the time in the world, you couldn't watch all the TV shows, movies.
Yeah.
There's so much. It's interesting. It has changed. I don't mean to suggest that nothing has changed. I like to say, in a way, when COVID-19 first started, what we do, so, if you think about the process of making, let's say, a TV show, let's say there's 30 steps. I'm just making that number up, 30 steps to make a TV show.
Yeah.
From when a writer has an idea, I'm going to do a funny show about this or that, to when it actually comes out. Writing the script, filming, hiring the actors, editing. Music is maybe step number 26 or 27. It happens it's post-production.
Yeah.
They do, often the music comes later. So when COVID-19 started, we were still getting a lot of requests because the shows and the movies that they had filmed in December, January, February, they'd finished filming and now they need music. They just kind of have to put the finishing touches on and edit it.
Yeah.
Then a few more months went on, and the shows, the projects that they would have been filming in March and April and May, which they hadn't filmed, went away. So I've seen something of a decline in TV and film, but ads have gone up and up and up. Everyone's advertising.
This was my point, yeah. In terms of advertising and online content, maybe. I mean,
I'm busy. My employee and I are busy every day from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to bed. There's so much coming in. And it's, it was funny because for the first month or so, everyone wanted the same type of music. They wanted sad but uplifting piano songs with lyrics about hope and togetherness. Well, because everyone's at home.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of freaking out a little bit. So if you're Coca-Cola, you want to do an ad about how Coca-Cola is going to make you feel warm and safe, and you know.
Okay, I didn't think that that would be something that, I mean, yeah, makes sense, but I never thought of it. Yeah.
But now, of course, things aren't necessarily getting back to normal in the real world, but the searches we're getting are starting, because we focus on a lot of music that's a little out there, vintage stuff, international stuff. So, I spent a lot of last week. There's a new TV show, a Netflix production that takes place in Southeast Asia in the early 1970s. So I got to spend a lot of time working with our partners and going through our catalog to find all this amazing psych rock from Thailand from 1973, the coolest stuff.
That was my next question. I was going to ask, when it comes to your catalog, how open are you to going into different genres of music that you've never heard of? As in, would you possibly go to, I don't know, to Egypt and hear a band or an artist and be like, I'm getting this guy to get onto this show? Or how does it work? What's the, like, what comes first, the artist or the demand from TV or whatever?
It's a great question. I mean, the short answer is yes. I absolutely would. We actually just had a song in Grammy, if you've seen the show, which is a wonderful show. And I have to give a shout out to the music supervisor for it, whose name is Rob Lowry, who I just think is a fantastic music supervisor. A lot of the music in that show is Egyptian. Our song actually was one of the few in the whole show that wasn't. It was a band from Spain, but that's neither here nor there. I look at things when we're considering what to take on for the catalog. I look at it from a few perspectives. One is music. I mean, it has to be good music. We have to like it. It has to feel special. If it's a genre that we kind of have a lot of, it has to feel really, really special. I mean, to put it another way, I don't need, we have some great sort of mid-tempo indie rock pop songs in the catalog, and I love a good pop song. And if there's something that's just incredible, if it blows us away, we want to work with it. But I'm more interested in, as you say, finding things in the catalog that we don't have that are unusual. Now, I'm not stupid. I realize that the need for example, Thai disco from 1973, it's not so often. People aren't going to be beating down my door for it. We got it's a post-punk band from Belarus, who I actually first saw in Estonia, actually, at Tallinn Music Week. They're called Super Bessa.
Okay.
They're incredible. They sound like Joy Division, but they're from Minsk, Belarus. And it's not that I get to pitch them very often, but I got them in a movie last year.
Okay.
So I love stuff that's more rare. It's, I try and be honest with the rights holders. I say, if your music is avant-garde saxophone jazz, I can't make any promises. I might only be able to pitch it for very unique circumstances, but I like having that available.
Yeah.
So the first criterion is the music awesome, interesting, unique? The next thing I look at is rights holders, who owns it. Because you deal with this, especially when you deal with electronic music or hip hop. If it has samples, for example, we can't use it if there's unclear samples. It's not a musical judgment. It's a legal issue.
All right. And is it easier? I mean, you obviously work with lots of labels. But is it easier to work with independent artists versus labels? As in, if you have a catalog that you're dealing with, how often do you go for artists who are not signed onto a label or onto a catalog or onto whatever, to go and pick them out and be like, I want this song on my catalog? Or how does that process work? So to put it in an example, if there's a Lebanese band that sings some good old punk rock in English that's unsigned, and how do they end up getting onto your catalog to eventually become potentially onto any movie or so on?
Well, the way for anyone to get onto the catalog is drop us a line and send us some music, of course. My email is dan@friendlyfirelicensing.com. I'm not precious about it. And I'll say, by the way, I would love to work with more artists from Lebanon, from the region. When we've talked about Wake Island,
I was going to say a good shout out to Wake Island.
just the best band, the nicest guys. I love those guys. That's the only Lebanese artist we work with, and they live in Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
But to answer your question, we absolutely work with unsigned artists. We do work with labels in general. Generally, the labels that we work with are independents. Some of them are large independents, but major labels, the Universals and Warners of the world, and the major publishers like BMG or Warner Chappell, they have incredible music, and I have some great friends at those places, but they work in a different way.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily work with independent sync agents like me.
Yeah.
To put it another way, Beyonce doesn't need someone like me pitching her music.
Yeah.
Coldplay doesn't need me pitching their music. So we work more with individual artists or labels. I will say, in a way, and we absolutely do have direct deals with artists. If there's an artist who is special, they own their own rights, and they're easy and pleasant to work with and nice people, absolutely. Sometimes it does make our job easier to have one relationship. Let's say there's a independent label that has 10 artists. To work with that label, build a relationship with the person at that label so they really understand what we need to do our job. And then, that's easier than maintaining 10 individual relationships with 10 individual artists. Some of them might be really good communicators. Some of them might be really bad communicators. So in some ways, I'll be honest and say my preference is to work with labels who have a basic understanding of how sync works, the materials that we need. And when we say we need, someone's interested in the song, we need the metadata, we need the wave file, we need the stems.
Yeah.
That is my preference sometimes, but I'm not against working directly with artists.
Okay. And all right, so moving along, just because that kind of covers that part. So given that you've worked with, you do work with a lot of independent artists, you work with labels. Given the current situation, which is no concerts anytime soon, no festivals anytime soon, let's say we fast forward 1 year from now. So July 2021.
Okay, my 41st birthday, I'm going to Oaxaca.
Exactly. Other than the massive party in Oaxaca, where do you see the music industry going in terms of licensing? Where do you see it? Like, what would you see for yourself licensing wise? Because we can watch this 1 year from now and be like, shit, you got it right or you got it wrong. And what do you see for artists today? Like, given that they can't necessarily earn income from gigs, which is primarily their main income in general, but like, where do you see this going at the moment?
Well, there's a piece of advice that I've been giving to artists since I started doing licensing, and it hasn't changed. And if anything, it's more true now than ever, which is if you're an artist and you're trying to make a career and make money as an artist, in addition to the other things you're doing, touring, recording, PR, social media, building a following, all of these things that you do, licensing and sync should be part of your plan. Whether it's, that doesn't have to be with me. There's 100 ways you can do it. There are other really talented sync agents out there. There are publishers that pitch for artists, and there are artists who can just go and do it directly and reach out to music supervisors. But as some of these other income streams have dried up, synchronization and licensing, I think, is a way, it's not a guarantee. If you pitch, there's not a guarantee that you're going to make it, but in a way, there's nothing to lose. And as we're during this time, where other income streams have really slowed down and touring is not going to make money, I really encourage artists to explore how they can make money from synchronization. It's not just money, by the way. It's also it is exposure and fame. You know,
because I mean, there's a lot of bands. I'm someone who plays a lot of, in normal circumstances, I do play a lot of FIFA on PlayStation, and the soundtrack of FIFA is something that's gigantic every year. It's super well curated. It makes us discover lots of bands and lots of artists, and I think it's really well done. And that's something I've always wondered. Like, one of the biggest objectives of a band could be, to be the theme song of FIFA 2021 or whatever.
Absolutely. Oh, and that'll make your career.
It'll make your career out of it. So yeah.
So so if there are artists who are finding themselves with a little bit of extra time, which I think a lot of people are, I think pursuing sync is a good thing to do. It means certain things. It means making sure that you know the splits, that you have the instrumentals, that you sort of learn best practices of how to pitch, maybe find a partner like me or like someone else who can help do it for you. I think what we're going to see as well is, although TV and film have slowed down for now, creators in outside of music, other creators are keeping busy too. So you imagine the TV showrunners and the directors, everyone has a project ready to go. As soon as there's a vaccine, as soon as they're allowed to film, I think we're going to just see this tidal wave of creativity.
Yeah, I agree. I also think even in the industry, I have this feeling that even in terms of tours and gigs, everyone has pushed their tours and gigs till 2021. I just feel there's going to be a ridiculous wave of gigs that are going to happen. And
I'm so desperate for that. Yeah, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It might take 1 year. It might take exactly 1 year. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
it's not going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, it's not going to happen tomorrow. But the minute it gets back properly, I have a feeling that it's gonna really boom up quite big. And hopefully artists can benefit from that, and they can understand the opportunity that's laying ahead. I don't know about you, but my biggest thing I preach for at the moment, here the lockdown has eased up, and in lots of places in Europe as well. But my thing is, I tell artists that now is the time to build your brand, is to build your name. You have to just keep doing things for free, to just keep yourself active, let people keep you at the top of their minds. And then when things open up again, they're going to remember that these guys were doing stuff,
you're doing the work behind the scenes. Well, we have a bit of let's think of this as like, it's like halftime. It's like halftime in a sports match. And, you go, the teams that win are the ones that go back to the locker room. They don't just sit around, watch TV. They go back to the locker room and they prepare for the next half. And I would absolutely encourage artists to think about licensing and think about synchronization as part of that plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way, like I said, there's nothing to lose.
There's nothing to lose. Absolutely nothing to lose. So we're almost done. And before we get done, obviously, so we met at Tallinn Music Week. And at the time, I remember I was really excited about the fact that we both knew Wake Island, and I couldn't believe that for me, it was a surreal moment. And then it turns out that you're a bit of a celebrity in those parts of the world.
I am.
For an incredible story that you told me about, and I would love you to tell that story.
Sure.
It's a hilarious story. So please.
Deal. Okay. All right. So I've been lucky enough, I've been fortunate enough to get to travel a lot because I do work with a lot of international artists, and I've spent a lot of time in various regions of the world, including in the Baltic and Nordic areas. So that's where we met, in Tallinn, Estonia, one of my favorite countries.
Same.
And we were there for this event, Tallinn Music Week, which I think is one of the best.
100%.
100%. Incredible.
Yeah.
And I'd had a pretty crazy weekend, because if you've been to these conferences, it's a lot of music, it's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of drinking, it's maybe not eating so healthfully. And I was there. I actually tripped and I fell on a cobblestone street. I tripped on like there's like a stone that was sticking out. I actually fractured my rib cage. So the point is, at the end of the weekend, it's Sunday, the conference is finally over, and I'm tired. I'm in that mood that you're in when at the end of a conference where you want to climb in, make yourself some herbal tea and climb in bed and listen to some quiet folk music. I wasn't in party mode. But I decided to go to Finland. I've been,
it's a ferry ride away.
Exactly. So from Tallinn, Estonia to Helsinki, Finland, there's a boat. And the boat goes, if it was going at full speed, it's not that far. It would probably be an hour. But the boat doesn't go at full speed. It goes kind of slowly. And the trip ends up being about 3.5 hours. And the reason that it does is that it's international waters, which means it's tax-free. Alcohol is very expensive in Finland, and it is not expensive on this boat. So the result is people go on this boat to buy their alcohol for the rest of the year. It's a booze cruise. It's a giant party boat. There's a DJ, there's people doing karaoke. It's crazy. So I'm on this boat, and again, it's the last one of the evening. It's Sunday night at about 10 o'clock. So it's not like it's Friday at 7. And I'm on this boat, tired, broken rib, and within 5 minutes, I don't think we've even pulled out of the port yet, this drunk guy comes up to me, really drunk. And I know he's drunk because he's holding an empty bottle of vodka, and tries to start a fight with me. And calls me a lamb fucker. I don't know. I'm assuming was an ethnic thing. I don't know. He was so drunk. He tried to punch me, and he was so drunk he swings and he misses and he loses his balance and he falls over. And there are police on the boat. They have like a brig. There's a jail on the boat. So they come and they arrest him. A couple minutes later, this guy gets down on his knee. I'm sitting next to these women, and he proposes to one of them, and she says no.
Really?
A couple minutes, yeah. A couple minutes after that, the captain of the ship gets on the intercom to announce that all of the toilets are clogged, so nobody can use the bathroom. A couple minutes after that, this kid, he must have been 11 or 12, who had a mullet, just starts throwing up everywhere. And I'm just sitting there like, what's happening? So all I can do is I was on Facebook, not even on Twitter, not publicly, just on Facebook, just posting about what was happening and making some jokes. Finally, we get into Finland. It's like, 1 a.m. I'm so tired. I take a taxi to my friend's house, and I get a call from a buddy of mine in San Francisco, where I'm from. He's a guy named Broke Ass Stewart, and he's like a blogger, kind of local celebrity. It's like, Dan, I read your posts. It was really funny. Do you mind if I do a blog post about it? Sure, whatever. Whatever. It's 1 a.m. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Next morning, it's Monday morning. I have a meeting with the record label that I was working with in Finland, and I'm in the meeting room, and I have my cell phone with me in my pocket, and it's just buzzing and buzzing and buzzing. I'm in a meeting, so you on a date or on a meeting, you keep your phone away.
Yeah.
But we get out of the meeting, and the colleague of the guy I'm meeting with comes up to me. He has his laptop open. He says, "Dan, you're on the front page of every newspaper in Finland." And this story, in like less than 24 hours, had gone ridiculously viral. Like American describes his booze cruise from hell. And I was on TV. I was in all the newspapers. I was women asked me out on dates. I got hundreds of Facebook friend requests. There was like a older couple, like an elderly couple who lived in the north of Finland. They said, come visit us anytime. We'll serve you reindeer. We'll show you Finnish hospitality. I met the Finnish ambassador ambassador to the United States. He knew who I was.
All this because your friend wrote that article and then it blew up.
All this basically because I told some jokes about a boat. I'm banned. I'm banned from the ferry. I'm not allowed on it.
Really?
Even though everything I said was true.
You're not allowed to get back on the ferry.
I'm not allowed on the ferry.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
But it's I realize it's just one small corner of the world, but I feel if you meet someone under the age of 50 from Finland or Estonia, they won't know my name, but if you say the American who took the ferry, they'll know who you're talking
Because
about.
I remember when you told me the story, I Googled it and I was like, wow. I was like,
It's like the first thing that comes up when you Google my name.
I was like, this was everywhere. Like this was properly everywhere. So it's a crazy story. I mean,
it makes me happy. I remember calling my mother and saying, "Oh, I think I'm going to stay in Finland for a few extra days." She said, "Why?" I said, "I think I'm a celebrity here."
That's great.
Well, I love it. And to me, it just goes to show, the world is such a big place, but it's also such a small place. And I love the fact that I can be talking with you, that you're in Beirut and I'm in Los Angeles, and that we can be talking about a story, and that and that we met in Estonia. This is what excites me about the world. It's what excites me about the music industry in general. Is that really, in a way, it's why I'm not so bothered that we're all sort of stuck at home for now, because we can still cross the world by talking with each other.
Yeah, we're all reconnecting somehow, and it's kind of like we're all starting at ground zero again. That's what I feel, and I just feel that there's a lot of. I keep saying it. I feel there's a lot of opportunities ahead, and suddenly those who are being proactive in this period are the ones who are gonna end up having some sort of positive light afterwards. So yeah, hopefully that continues. Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah, it was, look, time's up, which is great. Dan, it was great speaking to you. It's great. It's almost 11 p.m. here, which means it's almost bedtime.
Yeah.
For me. But thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. It's really an honor.
And I can't wait for us to have a beer again, be it in Tallinn or anywhere else. And
somewhere in the world, I look forward to drinking a beer with you soon.
Same here. So thanks again, Dan, and speak to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Cheers. Bye.